it's important, but and you can do that. And the way you can do this is to be prepared and to have a plan. And I think starting out at the very outset of your studies to like having a plan at the very beginning is so valuable. And you recommend it, Wasim, and I took that to heart and I made that plan and I scheduled my exam.
Hi, Andy.
Hi, Wasim.
Thanks a lot for taking this call, and many congratulations on passing your FE Electrical and Computer exam in the first attempt. So that's a great achievement.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, it feels really good to be on the other side of it.
Exactly. So, Andy, let's walk through your exam preparation journey. If I'm not mistaken, you're a 2004 graduate, which puts you 18 years out of school and makes this achievement all the more exciting and impressive. So, 18 years out of school, what motivated you to dive into FE exam prep and getting on to the path of PE licensure?
Great. Yeah, thanks for that question. Yeah, so uh, well, I will start out by saying that I don't know that I recommend waiting 18 years, but I did. Part of the reasoning for that was just I spent some time in my career not in engineering, and then I went and I recently re-entered into as an engineer at and you know at my current job, and so um, my my motivation was to enhance my credentials as an engineer. I've gotten I'm back in this pathway, and I want to have that be on be on that professional journey, and kind of and this is the first step, and I wanted to have that certification. I think it will be useful to me in this role and also in and in future roles, as I move through the rest of my career.
Yeah, for sure. So one of the things that I like to just clarify, and again, maybe I'm just being uh, nitpicky, is EIT is a certificate, but PE is a license. It's a license. There's a huge difference between a license and a certificate. Like if you're in controls industry or if you're in computer networks, like I know so many people who have like this huge stack of certificates, right? But all those certificates aside and the PE license aside, you know, it's um, it's arguably the most valuable designation license that you can have as a practicing engineer. So kudos to you for first of all, being out of school for so long and then diving back into engineering. And then once you're in engineering, you wanted to make sure that you basically do it right. Okay, get the credentials and then got onto the path. So, Andy, you enrolled in my course in December 2021, and you passed the exam in first attempt in March 2022. So, which is about 3 months. So, 11 December to March 15, so 3 months and a week. And in fact, um, your exam was scheduled a week later, but you were so ready. And after going through your computer simulated practice exam performance, I actually recommended you that Andy, let's pull it back because there's no point in waiting for the exam. If you can get an early time slot, just go in and you're going to pass that exam. So, how did you approach these 3 months? How did you package your all of your effort and intensity and made it happen with a 3 month timeline with full-time job?
Yeah, great question. So the timing of it did help a bit. I had a little more flexibility coming into the holidays in December. So there were several days where I could essentially study most of the day. So I got a lot. I would say I front loaded a lot of my study efforts. Um, but I started out by creating, as you recommended. I reviewed your example plan, the study plan, and first and second reviews of all the material, and I based my timeline on that. Um, I actually scheduled the test pretty much immediately after signing up for the course. I think I that same week I scheduled my exam, so I had a firm. I think for me, for my personality and for how I work, having that deadline on the books really helped me to focus my efforts and figure out, okay, what do I need to get done every week, or what do I need to get done over the next 2 or so months, so I can be in review, in more of a review mode for that last 2 or 3 weeks, but going into the exam. So I planned out. I adjusted my schedule a little bit and planned out time to study before and sometimes after work, and then longer study sessions on the weekends, with some breaks in there, but a lot of it was pretty it was pretty intense at first, and then yeah, so that was my plan, and that's how I mapped it out. And we talked a little bit also, as once I was a bit into the course, about the timing of practice exams and things like that. So I was more or less on target. Took that first practice exam. I think I want to say it was in February, the first computer based one, and then took and the other one sort of towards the end of February, or right in the beginning of March, and then reviewed the NCES exam, and then yeah, right about just the week before the exam. So yeah, and with your encouragement, yeah, to reschedule the exam, which was not. I mean, it made me a little anxious,
Hmm.
but in the end, it felt good, to move it up. I mean, I wasn't at that point. I felt like even a week more of studying was only probably going to build anxiety and not necessarily my preparation by that much more.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
No, that's
but that was my plan, and that was how I set out to do it. And basically, following a lot of your guidelines and your advice, and then tweaking it to suit my how I know I'm motivated.
Yeah, no, that's impressive. You made sure that you maintained the level of intensity throughout your exam preparation. And that's one of the things that I always remind my students that when they say that, Wasim, you know what, I'm willing to study for this exam for 6 months. I tell them you don't necessarily have to study for 6 months, right? In fact, my recommendation is to study for maybe 5 months, maybe 4 months, if possible, just 3 months, and increase the intensity, right? Increasing the intensity and compressing the timeline is probably more effective than giving yourself all the time in the world and just letting the fire burn on a slow mode, right? It's not as effective. So you set yourself a date as soon as you enroll into my course, like you registered for the exam, and then we discussed when you had your first Zoom call with me. I gave you 3 milestones to work with. One was the course completion with the study guide, and then a quick second round of review, and then practice exams. And you ended up hitting all of those milestones. And after you had done the second practice exam, your scores were significantly above average. And I told you, you know what, you can just go in and pull the exam back. So you mentioned about a lot of intense effort. So can you roughly quantify that on a weekly basis, what it looks like? How many hours were you putting in on an average for 3 months?
Yeah, I would say it was about. I want to say average. It was 15 hours a week.
Okay,
And maybe there were some weeks where there was a bit more, and some weeks where there was a bit less, just because life gets in the way. Other things come
sure.
up, but for the most part, I was pretty. Yeah, I was able to stick to that schedule. Um, yeah, and even adjusting. I mean, I don't know. Even visiting friends one weekend, I would wake up. Still woke up early and studied for a couple hours before everybody was ready to do
Yeah,
things. So I was able to get some time in, even when those um, yeah, and kind of make that sacrifice. It was also just yeah, and it worked out well for me in terms of just I planned to take it also at a time when I knew that I didn't have a lot on the calendar, so it was nice to so it was a good so it felt good to do it that way.
yeah,
I want to come back to your point about the intensity too. I think having that short focused time, yeah, 15 hours a week, yeah, it's a lot, and it's but having it compressed inside of that 3 months meant that it wasn't that long ago that I studied the mathematics portion, right? It wasn't that long
exactly.
ago that I did the early parts, because that's the
Yes.
stuff, and
Hmm.
it's such a heavily weighted part of the exam, and you're studying it first in the course, and it makes
Exactly.
total sense because a lot of things build on the mathematics portion where you need that foundation, but
Yeah.
having not too much distance from it really helped.
Yeah, that's 100% accurate because the exam, like it's challenging for multiple reasons, and one of the main reasons is that it covers so many topics. By the time you reach computer sections, you start forgetting stuff. So if you keep that timeline tight, right, without compromising, so there's a tendency, and we'll discuss that. Now, and in fact, when you reach the computer sections, and again, you work as an energy engineer, and you have re-entered engineering, right? And if when students get into the computer sections, right, they're seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. And sometimes there's that tendency to actually skip those sections, especially by power systems engineers, people who really haven't taken many courses in computers and softwares and this and that. And I remember that when you were around that point in time, I asked you like, how's computer networks going? Because I don't know, like it's not intentional. I don't try to overwhelm students with a lot of content in computer sections. I've added a lot of content in computer sections because I find so many students saying that I never took any course in computers or software or computer systems. So I balance that out by going pretty heavy. Only even though there's only 46 questions on the exam for each most of those sections, right? So tell me a little bit more about what was your attitude dealing with the sections that or the exam topics which you knew that you had very little handle on getting into the exam, and also because that you've been out of school for 18 years, that complicates things. But what was your approach in tackling these type of knowledge areas?
Yeah, good question. Um, right. I mean, yeah, it is tempting to just skip through the sections. But I knew that those were areas that it may only be 4 to 6 questions, but if I can get half or more of those right, that would be it gives me a little bit of breathing room on maybe other sections of the exam, or just gives one a baseline to yeah to go off of, rather than just sort of hoping you do well on the rest, and sort of sacrificing those sections. Um, and that review was really helpful. It was definitely areas where I had taken a couple courses. There was some beginning courses in computer architecture and things like that before in my degree, before going into more specialized, a more specialized area, which was not computer focused. So um, going yeah go I just went I went through each section, and just went through the section, did all the study guide problems, took all the quizzes, took all the mini exams, that were everything available that you have available in that section. And really just a lot of it was understanding the for much of that was the approach, is just trying to get at least some foundation in those, so I could take that into the exam, and figure things out, or have a shot at figuring it out.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, the fundamental stuff is easy. It's not that difficult. And when you actually take the approach of skipping sections altogether, you lose out on the easy stuff as well, right? And granted, like if you want to get good grasp of those concepts, you really need to dive deeply. But skipping, it's a big no-no. Don't skip anything, okay? Especially if you're enrolled in the course, you have access to the material, then by all means, go through it, okay? Plan accordingly. If you feel rushed, then push the exam date out. It's not the end of the world unless you're under specific deadline through your employer or whatever. That's a different story. But I mean, pushing the exam out a couple of weeks is not going to change anything. In your case, Andy, I recommended that you pull it back because you were so ready. So let's talk a little bit about your exam day experience. I know that when you did your computer science practice exam number one and practice exam number two, there were some areas that we identified, action items, things that you had to review, things that you had to spend a little bit of extra time on. But in both of those practice exams, you were scoring above average and your time management was pretty decent. So let me know how your exam day experience went. And there were a couple of things that you ran into, right? So let's discuss that.
yeah, sure. So, exam day experience. Yeah, so I had changed the exam date, and I moved it, to it was a different testing center, still relatively close by. I'm in the Bay Area, so there's a few around, and so that made it wasn't that hard. One thing that was a benefit, was it ended up moving it later in the day, so I had a little more time in the morning to just wake up, have my coffee, that kind of thing, get ready for the exam. I planned out, I knew exactly where I was going, and I had made a list. I set up, the night before, I guess, I set out everything that I needed, to bring with me. They have a list of all the things you need. Just have those things. Try to have fewer things to think about the day of the exam. That works really well for me anyway. Just not, having everything ready to go, in a bag. Just walk out the door, and then. Um, I managed to get good sleep. I had slept poorly the 2 nights before the exam, and then I slept well the night before the exam, so that was great. Felt good about that. Um, Incidentally, when I did one of the practice exams, I had not slept very well, and I went did it, and it still went pretty well. So that was also a useful proof of concept for me that I could probably get through it on not enough sleep if that happened. The day of the exam, everything went smoothly. Getting into the exam center, I arrived early, and actually, I think I started my exam slightly early, based on the appointment time that I had set. So that was just based on it wasn't that busy, and they got me in the door. But you will be in the setting center with other folks. I don't think anybody else is taking an F. I don't think anybody else is taking the FE exam. I think everybody else is doing other certifications. So different types of exams. Going into the testing room, that was all, felt good. Everything went smoothly. I popped on the noise canceling headphones, or
Hmm.
just the earmuffs, and that was nice to have. Yeah, and then once I got into the test, felt really good, felt really strong going into it. I was through the computer exam prep, through the course. Um, I was familiar with with the interface. Um,
Hmm.
and I went through the interface on the website as well. They'll there's a demo interface that it takes you through the same thing when you're in the exam as well. But it's kind of nice to do it when you aren't under any kind of pressure, just to see what it looks like and how the exam is going to look on your screen. Um, yeah, first section went really well. I was going back, and stop me if you but I'll if you need to ask another question. But I was going through the section, and the first half, and it hadn't really clicked with me that I was given the full exam time, and that it was not going to say, "Hey, you're about halfway. You need to stop." There's
Yeah.
no kind of signal that you're halfway through the time. So uh, I think this should have been obvious. It's definitely written in the exam guidelines, um, but it's just a good reminder, folks. You've got the whole time there right in front of you, but you do need to manage it yourself.
Hmm.
So I got to the end of the first section. I was reviewing some of the flagged questions, made a few changes, realized I had taken a bit of time doing that, and then I moved on to the next section, or
You
the
didn't,
second half.
and you didn't take break in between.
No, I didn't, and I don't know that I recommend it, but
Yeah.
for me, I was in this, I was ready to go. I would say, I was in a flow state. I was feeling really strong. I didn't have, um, I wasn't hungry. I didn't need a break for really any other reason. So I was kind of just ready to go. So I think I stared at that "Do you want to take a break now?" screen for 30 seconds to a minute, and then I said no, and I just went forward. So I don't know that I would do that, but I would,
Right.
but it seems to have worked for me. So if you're feeling it, you have the option. But uh, starting that second half, I had taken a little too much time on the first half, and I was about 2 minutes a question left, when I just wanted to get a sense of how I needed to budget my time, and that
Yeah.
was motivating. So I just and for fortunately there were many questions that I was able to get through in under a minute, under maybe even under 30 seconds, um,
On the second half, which generally is
on the second
considered more
half.
difficult. That's very impressive.
I think, yeah. Thank you. I don't know. Yeah, I can't remember. I don't remember very many of the questions at all, or what order they came in. But I think that some of it was, um, I was able to at least zero in on the right answers, or what maybe on the what
Yeah, you
answer I
were.
thought was correct.
I could tell you were over prepared, right? That's why I recommended you to take the exam sooner rather than later. So you going into the second half, right? I just want to re-emphasize this. You did a quick calculation and you found that you were down from 3 minutes per question to 2 minutes per question for the remaining questions, right? And
Hmm.
then by the time you were done with the second half, you actually had 7 minutes to spare. So you basically cruised through the second half. Uh, that's how well prepared you were.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I did. I think I was also motivated by that 2 minutes a question. I was at the beginning. I was like, oh no, I need to focus on the time management here. And so if I got stuck anywhere, just flag it and move on.
Yeah.
pick an answer, flag it, and move on. Like at
Yeah.
least pick an answer because you've got a 25% chance, right? And so yeah, I was able to get to the end with a little time to spare and had a little bit of time to review some of the flagged questions before I ended the exam. So yeah, so that felt really good.
So that's great.
It definitely feels good to get to the end with time left. So
Yes, exactly. So that's great. So you did really well, Andy, and I think that the underlying the underlying theme over here is the fact that you were over prepared, right? And it's not easy to become over prepared. It's not easy to get to that level where you're ready to deal with these type of uncertainties or things that might surprise you. I mean, the exam in itself would probably have a lot of surprises, right? It's not an easy exam. But if you are willing to put in the time and effort, use effective exam preparation resources, then there is no reason why you cannot uh, deal with it with ease and comfort. So before we move on, do you have any advice for students who are thinking about taking the FE exam, who might be even a little bit frightened, intimidated, scared of this exam? How would what would you tell them? What's the best way to go about it?
yeah, great question. I mean, I think a lot of the I might be repeating a lot of the advice that's out there and a lot of the advice that you give, but for me, I think um, fine. I mean, don't be too afraid. Try not to be afraid. It's an exam, and exams are what they are. And you do, if you need it, you've got multiple chances. So it's not. It's important, but and you can do this. And I think just getting and the way you can do this is to be prepared and to have a plan. And I think starting out at the very outset of your studies to like having a plan at the very beginning is so valuable. And you recommended Wasim, and I took that to heart, and I made that plan, and I scheduled my exam. The reason also that it's valuable to schedule that exam early is that you get a choice of dates. If you get close to the exam,
Yeah,
even though there was availability for me to reschedule, it was still not trivial. It's much harder to schedule an exam like 2 to 4 weeks out than if you schedule it 4 months out or 3 months out. So
yeah,
so set that exam date, plan it out, and work towards that goal. I think at least for me that was very helpful. Um, and then make a plan for how you're going to study every week. Talk to your manager. Also, talk to your people at work if you are working, to see what kind of support they can offer. I didn't end up having this support, but I know, but it was, but there may be some possibility to take a little bit of time away from work for study time. So you can think
yeah.
about how that
A lot
works.
of
So
students do that. So they have that open conversation with their supervisor, explain them it's an important project and it can help the employer as well. And then a lot of times your supervisor would probably be flexible and
mhm.
give you that flexibility. Yeah,
Yeah, they
great.
want you to get this certification. It's good for them and it's good for you. So I think it's so you can go into that with that perspective. And then in terms of preparation, yeah, use this course and then and use the study guide and identify the weak areas um, and and identify those weak areas both when you have you're not time constrained and you're going through the study guide, and then also on those mini exams and the practice exams, and use that as your guidance on where to study more. I even found it useful after a little bit of time. I would go back to I had done the problems in the study guide, but it had been maybe a month, and so I went back to them. And even though they were familiar, it's more about practicing the steps to go through. Like I'm
Yeah,
solving a BJT circuit. What are the steps I need to go through to get? And that was an area that was a little bit weak for me. So it was just remembering the steps and what I needed to show and how I needed to get whatever result I was looking for. So
exactly.
um, so yeah, I think those would be the big tips, I think, and then try to get some sleep the
Yeah,
week of the exam and the week
for
before the
sure.
exam. And I didn't mention this, but I meditate and not super regularly, but I did it, but I did it before the exam. Just a quick, just something to whatever relaxes you.
Yeah,
You've got time if you have time if you arrive early. Try to take that time to center yourself going into that room, and then just you know just do
Yeah.
it.
Just give it your best shot.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Okay, awesome. Thanks a lot for those amazing words of advice. And those are all very simple, fundamental things. But when you start putting them together, it becomes a very powerful force. Okay. And another thing that I'd like to add to that, just to finish off, is that there's no shortcut. Okay. There's no shortcut to getting this exam done. Whoever says otherwise is, yeah, it's probably just kidding around, right? uh, you have to put in the time and effort over a over a long enough period of time. Okay, not very long, hopefully. And if you're using the right and effective exam preparation resources with the proper planning, anyone can get this done. It's just that you have to match up your level of effort with what you're aiming for. And if your aim is to get this done in the first attempt, you have to put in quite a bit of effort. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it's worth it. Put in the effort now. Don't so you yeah, and hopefully you don't have to do it again. That's the idea. So yeah, put in the effort now so you don't have to do
Exactly.
it. Yeah,
All
do it
right.
again.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Andy.
All right, thank you, Wasim. Appreciate it.